The Incredibles is easily in my top 3 favorite movies of all time. I love that movie to death. Which, yes, proves that a person can love that film even if they weren't born in the 1990s. Crazy, I know. I've watched that movie over and over again for as long as I can remember, and that's led to me imagining what a possible sequel could do pretty much my entire life. And now, here we are. It feels kinda surreal, but it's out. The Incredibles 2. So, let's talk about it. Also, if the audio sounds a bit different here, it's because I'm currently in America and using my old mic, and yada yada, just wanted to let you know. Anyway, Incredibles 2. This review is going to be spoiler-free, but if you haven't seen this yet, I'd recommend watching the movie first, because the less you know about this, I imagine the more you'll enjoy it. Anyway, did I love this as much as the first? Well, no, but there's something to do with that I sort of realized going into this. There was no possible way, even if this movie was objectively as well made as the first film, that I could love it as much as I love that one. Because that movie is a huge part of my childhood, and is more than just a film for me. So the experience with this film just simply could not be the same. I kept that in mind while watching this, and that really helped me to appreciate this more. I know I've been saying how excited I've been for this film for ages, but for once, I feel like I successfully managed my expectations. And ultimately, I really enjoyed this. I didn't think this would be the case at all, but I wasn't remotely disappointed coming out of this. I don't think it was perfect, but overall, it was such a satisfying and fun experience that I couldn't help but smile when the credits rolled. Character and voice acting wise, this is pretty spot on. The returning cast are all as great as they were before, especially Holly Hunter as Elastigirl. Also Sam Jackson is a standout. And the new voice for Dash is close enough to the original that it wasn't distracting. The new additions, Bob Odenkirk, Catherine Keener, etc. Yeah, they're good. In this case, I don't really know how else to review voice acting performances. They're good. As far as the characters themselves, I've found that a big problem with sequels to movies that weren't originally made with sequels in mind is that the characters' arcs and journeys are pretty much done, so a sequel would be pointless. It's why I wouldn't necessarily love to see a Hot Fuzz 2 or a Baby Driver 2. I feel like those characters' stories are finished, and they grew in the way that they had to. Here, however, that wasn't the case. With Bob especially, he has a new arc in this film that, granted, is similar to his arc in the first movie, but it does have some new aspects to it. It doesn't feel like they threw away everything you learned in the first film just to make this. It felt more natural than that. Elastigirl also has a very interesting and major part in this film that I don't want to spoil. And really, this just does feel like a natural progression from the first film. And I don't mean just in terms of like action and that sort of thing, which we'll talk about in a sec. Even 14 years later, these feel like the same characters and it feels like the same world. I also enjoyed the story and character conflicts in this. They're more complicated than I'd say an average kids movie, just like the first film, and I really appreciated that. That first movie has quite a few scenes that I didn't understand at all until I was older, and I think this will be the same case for little kids who see this film. There was even one part with Bob and Violet that made me tear up a little, which I honestly wasn't expecting. Basically, this didn't feel like a cash grab sequel in any sense. It felt like there was genuine thought put into where the characters would be at this point and what new interesting conflicts they could be a part of. There are other parts of this film though, for example, the animation. Watching the trailers, I was a little worried that the animation was going to be distractingly different, just because I'm so used to these characters looking a certain way in their 2004 animation style, and now they're much cleaner and smoother and, 2018 styled. But in the movie, it didn't take me out of it at all. If anything, it was the opposite. It added so much to the film. It looks gorgeous and sleek, and the animation was utilized perfectly in some of the crazy action scenes. Speaking of which, I loved the action in this, especially one scene in the Parr's new house, which had me grinning from ear to ear from start to finish. Another highlight would be the big climactic action scene, which was also fantastic. The music is of course amazing, the Incredibles theme is one of my favorite themes of all time, and the new stuff they added here was great too. For nearly all of it, I thought the jokes worked, it was very funny. They might have relied a tad too much on Jack Jack for the humor for my taste, but the majority of his stuff was hilarious, especially one part towards the start of the climactic action scene. Also, can I just say, I love that the trailers gave away so little. The final act of this film, we've basically seen none of in the trailers, which made it just that much cooler. I mean, ultimately, I just have to say, this was a satisfying experience. It met my expectations, I wasn't disappointed. It progressed everything from the first film in a fun way, brought a few new things to the table. It's a very good sequel with the feel of the first film that doesn't feel like a total retread. I will say, there are a few warnings in terms of this film. One, seizure warning, because there were a lot of flashing light scenes in this, so if you're prone to seizures, yeah, this is not for you. And if you're not, then you still might get a headache. And two, I also want to say, this has some pretty terrifying moments in it for little kids. Like there's one scene in particular with the screenslaver where I was like, if I was a kid, I would be horrified right now. And in my cinema, there was even a little kid who yelled out, "I'm really scared" during that scene. But I kinda like the fact that that's in this film, because a big part of kids' films for me growing up were the moments that really messed me up or traumatized me, that later, now, I can look back on. For me, that was the dream episode of Justice League, or the werewolf scene from Harry Potter, or the face melting from Indiana Jones, or Coraline, just all of Coraline. I feel like that's a part of growing up with movies. So I like the fact that this could be that sort of film for a whole generation of kids. Now, like I said, the movie isn't perfect. There are a few things I didn't love. For one, no spoilers, but I'd say the most obvious problem is that there's an extremely predictable twist in here. I really thought throughout most of this, that can't be the twist, because it's way too obvious. It's gotta be a misdirect. But nope, it was that, and that just felt less well done than everything else in the film. There are also quite a few beats copied from the first movie. Like some of it they put a twist on, and there's definitely some new stuff here, but at points I was like, oh, I recognize that. I've seen it from every single time I watched that first film. Speaking of the first Incredibles, a big problem with movie sequels to popular films is that they just end up being fan service filled and a best of highlight reel of the first film. I'm sorry to keep bringing this one up, but Kingsman 2, to me, is the perfect example of this. Seriously, there are so many references to awesome moments in that first film that it starts to get kind of embarrassing. And I say that as someone who's a huge fan of the first film. It's like if someone does something really cool and then afterwards constantly goes, hey, remember that time I did that really cool thing? It instantly makes that thing less cool. In this movie, I think, mostly avoided that trap. For the most part, I thought the references to the first film and little Easter eggs worked, even if it was there just for fan service. Most of the time, it worked into the story in a natural way, so it didn't feel totally shoehorned in. For example, the car. But a few times, especially towards the start, yeah, there were a few that were just a bit too on the nose, where characters would just say, hey, remember this thing that happened? In a not very natural way. I was a little worried there at the start, but it didn't come up as much throughout the rest of the film. Speaking of which, just subjectively, yeah, I do have a ton of nostalgia for the first film, so some of these moments are just going to be really cool to me. The opening with the Underminer, after having seen that cliffhanger ending so many times, to see it resolved was kind of amazing. And when the title sequence came on with that music, yeah, it gave me chills. Anyway, I'm supposed to be talking about what I didn't like here. Something else is that the movie does slow down a bit towards the end of the first act, and the start of the second, or around there. I'd say the first film is perfectly paced, and this one is mostly good in that respect, except for that point. It's the part where Elastigirl starts meeting more people involved with Bob Odenkirk's project, and there's a montage of Bob taking care of the kids. Most of that was very funny and enjoyable, but towards the end of it, I was like, okay, maybe it's time to move it along a little. It started to feel a little bit like the movie was sort of just running in place. Also, this isn't really a negative, but for all these years, I assumed that the family knew that Jack had superpowers. I guess because that ending takes place 3 months after the first film, and I thought they would have discovered it by now, or seen something with Syndrome. But when I thought about it, I guess they didn't see what happened up there. So, it makes sense. It just took a bit of time for me to realize, oh right, they don't know this. That would probably be pretty weird for them. Overall though, The Incredibles 2 was way more satisfying than I thought it could be. For big fans of the original, it's a fulfilling follow-up that gives more of what you love, in terms of action and character, and adds some new stuff. And for people who just want a fun kids movie, this is a very enjoyable ride. It does follow some tropes and can be a tad predictable, but to me this didn't feel like just a cash grab where Pixar was like, make sequels to our most popular films. I enjoyed this a lot more than Finding Dory and even Monsters U, which I really liked. I definitely wouldn't say that this is better than the first, but it was a really good follow-up that I feel was worth the wait. I'll give The Incredibles 2 a 9 out of 10. So those are my thoughts on The Incredibles 2. What did you think of it? Let me know all of your thoughts down below in the comments. While you're at it, be sure to like this video, check out my Instagram and Twitter at BHL_Hudson, check out this podcast about movies and TV and whatnot I do every other week with a friend of mine. It's called The Poorly Planned Podcast. And subscribe for more videos like the one you just watched. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.